Okay, so we are right now, I guess, looking for Dave Conti to join us. But while we're waiting for him, Marlene, why don't you go ahead and report on the tour? And check with anybody else you have to check with.
Sure. And Kate, I know I heard from you that you'll be able to come. So I let Dave know that there would probably be 6 people. So I think that's where we are. And we're supposed to meet tomorrow night at 4 p.m. So I'll be there a little bit early, just in case to catch up with Bob at the top of the Mountain Park Access Road.
At the infamous yellow gate, right?
At the infamous yellow gate.
$30,000 gate.
Oh
Now,
my.
are you talking about the Mount Tom side? You're not talking about getting in via
Not 141.
141?
Not
No,
141.
Okay.
Not 141.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and here is Dave Conti.
Wonderful.
Great, great, great.
Okay. Dave Moore, would you like to introduce Mr. Conti and
I'd be happy to do that.
then we can fire when ready.
Okay. I asked Mr. Conti if he would come because there was the usual amount of questions, and we're getting closer and closer to talking to the public. And we all thought, and Mr. Conti agreed to come tonight to help us. He's here to answer questions. Okay, he doesn't have any presentation to make, but we want to ask any questions because he sure doesn't want to come to the public hearing. So I welcome you, Mr. Conti, as always, and thank you very much. I'm taking the minutes, so I'll clam up. Okay. Thank you again.
Hi, Dave.
Hi,
Hi.
Kip.
How you doing?
Hi, Kip.
Is Kip here?
Yeah, Kip's here.
Kip just
Kim
came.
just checked in.
I am. I made it. I don't know what the technical issue was, but thank you, whoever sent me that.
Okay. Kate's here, right?
Kate's on mute, but she's.
I'm here, but I'm
No, that's all right.
driving my kid to soccer, so
That's all right.
I'm listening.
I'm just taking attendance, okay? Okay, Mike Curtin's here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Conti, anybody have any questions for Mr. Conti about what we talked about for the last month?
This isn't really a question, but Dave, would you restate the water department's position as regards future use of the reservoir?
Well, the board's position with regards to the use of the reservoir was spelled out in the ordinance that was established. There is a specific section for it, but it's primarily passive recreational activity, walking, jogging, hiking, bicycling. That's what the board has limited the 2 in-town reservoirs that are on emergency standby as listed with the Department of Environmental Protection. The McLean Reservoir is off limits to the general public because it is part of our primary water source. But that is the established practice with regards to Whiting Street and Ashley.
You know, I read through most of the Wigmore Forest Management Report, and there were a couple of things in there that I wondered about. One was the plan was to make their management plan available to the public at the Holyoke Public Library. Was that done? And is there a copy there?
I couldn't answer that question. I'd have to check with our forester, Mary Wigmore. I know that she has been involved in the program, but exactly what documentation she's prepared or submitted, I can't answer that question.
Okay, and then there was another Stewardship Council Green Certification Program that it said that the water department was planning to get into.
We
And I
work,
wondered if you did, and what that was all about.
We did. Again, that is a question that our forester would have to answer. That is with regards to management of the forest lands, with regards to our harvesting program, with regards to protection of a lot of the endangered species, and best management practices of the roads and trails that are used around the reservoir. But again, that is a question that I can't answer because I don't know the specifics. That would be, again, our forester. I know that we've been involved in the program. I think the program has been dissolved. I know the state is no longer participating, but we are still following those guidelines. But again, I'm not sure exactly with regards to that. You would have to speak to Mary Wigmore.
Then you do have a management plan for the forests in place.
Yes, we do, for all of our forest lands.
And are you harvesting logs?
Yes, we are harvesting. Yes, we have cutting programs that are in effect. Most of the harvesting is in the town of Southampton, West Hampton, Montgomery, and Huntington. Those are the majority of our forest acres. We are looking at some in-town harvesting, but a lot of the areas that we're looking to harvest are out of the public view and not accessible to the public. So one of the sales that's being developed right now is McLean Reservoir. I would say it is west of the McLean Reservoir. There's a plot that we will be harvesting, thinning. We only take the largest trees down. So that, again, those trees are marked. We go through the state forester with regards to those programs, and they are approved by the state forester. But it is beneficial. There is a benefit to harvesting, but we only harvest a certain percentage of our forest lands because there is a certain amount or a certain percentage of our lands that have been set aside under our carbon program. So there is a percentage of land that is specifically untouched that's used under the carbon program. Then there is a certain percentage of our land, which is around 20 or 30%, that's used for forestry. And then we also have the remaining percentage is used for a buffer. So in the event that there's fires or there's infestation of the trees, or damage to the forest lands, that buffer can be used under our carbon program.
Okay, but if I'm hearing you correctly, none of that really affects Whiting Street.
No. I haven't harvested any of the timber around the Whiting Street Reservoir, I would say, in the last 15 years, 20 years. There are some stands I would like to look at. The problem with the reservoir is because of getting in and out of the reservoir access, there is really not a lot of land that's harvestable. So the benefit weighed against, the impacts to the environment are questionable. So I don't envision any harvesting of the Whiting Street Reservoir within the next 5 years. But if we were to do a harvest, I would try to do it in conjunction with, and this would be a consideration, try to do it in conjunction with the construction of the spillway. But again, that would go through the state forester. And it would be land, and that land would be specific to or adjacent to the golf course. That would be about the only area we could harvest.
Okay,
Dave, is that spillway project still going on for next year, still scheduled for next year?
You scheduled to go out the bid in winter of 2022, pending, acquisition of all the permits that we need to acquire for the actual construction. Yes, but that is still on schedule.
Okay. So it's scheduled to the actual work being done the following year?
I would say you would be looking at construction in the summer of 2022.
Will the reservoir be closed to the public when that begins?
A portion of it will be, yes. We haven't, finalized what areas would be off limits to the general public, but specifically in front of the dam area, yes. And then we'd have to look at access, because you're talking a tremendous amount of construction equipment coming in and out of the reservoir. You're talking about a tremendous amount of concrete that's going to be necessary to build the size of this structure. So we haven't made any definitive decisions, but I know for a fact that if we are to allow access from the mountain park area, and once you get up to the dam, you would only be allowed to walk northerly. You won't be able to walk in the direction of the spillway. So I would assume at minimum, the reservoir would be closed off at that point, and you'd only be permitted to walk around the reservoir and up to the fork in the road that comes off of East Hampton Road. Everything else would be shut down because of the extent of the construction. And again, we're anticipating that construction would begin in summer of 2022.
And last how long?
At least a year, at least a year. I don't know the specifics. I don't know the schedule yet. A lot of it's based on permits, but I'm anticipating it would take at least a year to build that structure.
So Dave, thanks for coming to talk to us. I had some questions related to the kind of the protections that are on the reservoir. So you have Chapter 97 is one layer of protections. You have what I'm most curious about, the provisions of if the reservoir is designated as an emergency drinking water reservoir, which I'm gathering, that's a kind of an official designation, and it means you have to have certain protections in place, and that to some degree governs what you can do there. And then the third related question is really, then it sounds like, you mentioned that, the Water Commission has set certain provisions in place, but I gather many of those provisions that have been set in place by your board are really related to the necessary protections to keep your designation as a emergency drinking water reservoir. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, the dam Office of Dam Safety, Department of Conservation and Recreation requires us to conduct an inspection of the dam structure and gatehouse every 2 years. And that's required because of its size and its classification. So it's classified as a large source, and the classification for the hazard is high hazard. So that triggers the 2-year inspection. And every 2 years, our consultant develops a report, and that report identifies deficiencies in the reservoir. The primary deficiency in that reservoir is specific to the spillway. And other deficiencies, some of them are the tow drains that we'll be working on, the access roads, the gatehouse. You're going to see some improvements to the gatehouse this year. That's specific to the dam. Now, DEP requires us to maintain that source as an emergency backup. So in the event, God forbid, there is a catastrophic failure of our source in the area of McLean Reservoir. Say for instance, we were to lose the tanks, the high service tanks. Well, we lost the high service tanks, we would lose all of our drinking water. So under that instance, we could put that reservoir under state approval back into operation, which could be done within 24 hours on a limited basis, just to provide or try to provide a portion of the city with drinking water and fire protection. So that's one of the benefits of the Whiting Street Reservoir, that in that instance where we were to lose our supply, because remember, the entire supply for the city comes from the southerly portion, and it's all through the McLean Reservoir and through the treatment plant. In the event of losing that, we have an alternate source just on an emergency basis, which is the Whiting Street Reservoir, which is still connected to the distribution system. There's a section of pipe that's removed. The state requires us to remove that section because it's technically a cross connection, because you have a potable source connected to a non-potable source. And the reason I'm saying it's non-potable is because it doesn't meet the drinking water standards under the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's not treated. But under such emergency conditions, we could put that reservoir within operation within 24 hours. That's why you see there's been some improvements done to that particular facility that's at the base, just beyond the base of the dam. So that's been renovated. So that falls under DEP's jurisdiction.
So just some follow-up. So that's helpful. And again, some of that's technical, and I won't remember all that. But are you saying you could run Whiting Street through the treatment?
No, we could, if in the event of a catastrophic failure of our system, we would be able to supply residents of Holyoke with water, not potable water. There'd be a boil, but it would provide water on a limited basis under the discretion and jurisdiction of the Department of Environmental Protection. It would be an emergency order.
So there is no connection from Whiting Street to the treatment facility at all?
No, it's connected to the distribution system. And it's connected to the distribution system, but there is a section of pipe where that connection is in that pump house that's been physically removed. So there is no potential, there is no cross connection of potable water and non-potable water.
So when you made updates to the chlorination facility and all that's near, I think there's a chlorination facility near Whiting. Those updates are those updates also made for from the emergency standpoint, to maintain that emergency designation?
Well, that used to be prior to 1996. That used to be an active source of water from the northerly part of the system. When we built the new treatment facility down by the McLean Reservoir, we took that facility offline. We removed all the chlorinators, we removed all the fluoride tanks, and what is left in there is just a physical connection to the distribution system. There is no means to chlorinate, but there's a physical connection that can easily be made with a spool piece that is in that facility to supply water, like I said, non-potable water to the residents of Holyoke. And that would be on an extreme case where catastrophic failure of the treatment plant.
Okay. So last question I will ask for now is, so are there long-term plans that the water board, that your commission has discussed for, looking down the road and thinking what advantages there might be for using Whiting in a different way? And whatever.
I think there's always going to be an advantage if you maintain that source. I mean, I can't speak for what is going to happen 50 years from now, but just remember that the Whiting Street Reservoir is relatively close to neighboring communities like East Hampton, Northampton, Southampton, South Hadley. There was a study that was conducted years ago by the MWRA to look at that particular reservoir supplying water to South Hadley Fire District 1. And it was never pursued because the MWRA developed an agreement with those communities. But again, what's your alternative other than maintaining this source of water? Because again, you're looking at a lot of the communities that border this reservoir rely on groundwater sources. And we're finding out now, you're familiar with PFAS, those the 6 compounds, that is very prevalent in groundwater sources. So, and remember now, testing is being conducted in the parts per trillion. So a lot of these communities that rely on groundwater sources are looking at means to treat these compounds or filter out these compounds. So I'm just saying that 50 years from now, nobody's building new sources of water, and this reservoir has a yield of 1.6 million gallons. It's got almost a 500 million gallons of water available that could be used for neighboring communities. So I wouldn't rule that out. Now, what's your option? What's your option other than keeping the reservoir on an emergency standby? People have mentioned, suggested draining it. Okay, okay. So this, but that has been kicked around. They're saying, well, why are we investing, $3 million in upgrading the spillway? We putting money into a reservoir that's on emergency standby. Well, you have to do that, number one, because of the dangers associated with that spillway. It's the only spillway of all of our sources that does not meet Army Corps standards for 500-year flood or half PMF, probable maximum flood. Okay. And what would happen is what we do now, and what I've been doing for the last 20 years, is draw that water supply down and maintain that water level 2 feet below spillway crest. And what that does in maintaining that reservoir at that particular level is that in the event of a 500-year storm or a half PMF storm, the water would not overtopple the dam. So if I kept that reservoir at full capacity and we were to experience one of those events, there'd be overtoppling of the dam, loss of the earthen material, potential failure of that dam, and the potential failure of that dam would result in the destruction of Interstate 91 and loss of life. So that's the reason we maintain that reservoir at that level. The new spillway is going to be designed so that it meets those state standards, the half PMF, the 500-year event. And the department is not going to be in that position where we are going to have to constantly monitor levels in the event of those particular storms. So the other option is if you don't want to keep it as an emergency source, is to drain it. And those suggestions have been made. Now, you're not going to go out there and just drain this reservoir. The state is not going to let you just drain this reservoir. There's going to have to be thousands and thousands of dollars spent on studies, on the impact to vegetation downstream of that dam, wildlife, stream flows. And then once you get through all those studies, now you're looking at actually breaching that dam and removing that dam, which would be millions and millions of dollars. And what are you going to be left with? A swamp.
So related.
The quarry.
Quarry, yeah, an eyesore. That's what you'd be left with. So I think that these jewels of Holyoke should be maintained and maintained up to today's standards. And like I said, nobody's creating new sources of water. And you're looking at all these new regulations that are coming out for groundwater sources, and this reservoir borders these communities. So there's a great possibility in the future that some neighboring community is going to take advantage of this water supply. That's
right, but that's not, and so that was part of my question. So is there, is that an active plan to take advantage of that? And I mean, then there would be income derived if you were selling the water, if you were using that as a water source to communities, or if you were selling it to Chicopee or East Hampton, but that's not a specific plan on the books and something that's being considered right now as a revenue generation. And also it would retain, you could certainly have an agreement that would say if Holyoke needed the water, then the agreement is null and void, although that would put any other community that was depending on it in a rough spot. But
right.
So,
right. And you may see a change in the position. There could be future commissions that may want to take advantage of that source because right now the city's being fed from the south. Okay. And the way the city was originally constructed, it was designed to be fed from both the south and the north. So if you look at all the transmission mains and the way they're designed, they're really, I mean, an ideal water system, there should be a satellite facility used at the Whiting Street Reservoir to provide some source of water from the northerly section of the city for reliability reasons, for transmission reasons, for water quality reasons. So that may be something that could be taken up under consideration in the future too. But again, there's a cost associated with utilizing that source and building that treatment plant specifically for supplying water from the northerly end of the city. But again, that's a possibility. That's a possibility.
Would that have an income generation component? You know, so if you
No.
add, so
No,
only if you added communities.
there would be an expense associated with it. Yes, to the ratepayers, there'd be an expense. And that's the reason why when the water commissioners back in 1992 developed this study, one of the considerations was building a satellite treatment facility up at the Whiting Street Reservoir and utilizing that source to supply water from the north. And because of the cost associated with it, they went the more economical route and is currently supplying the city solely from the southerly end. But new boards, new commissions may have a different view on things.
Dave, do you have a sense of what that number was to put in a filtration system or treatment system at Whiting Street? 50 million, 100 million?
No. It wouldn't be a large facility. I can't really put a number to it, but it would only be designed to treat probably up to, well, the yield of the reservoir is 1.6 million gallons a day. That's the yield. Okay. We're currently using between 5 and 6 million gallons, the entire city. So like the McLean Reservoir. Now, like the McLean Reservoir, we use the McLean Reservoir. We augment the Ty-Carmody Reservoir's source on a regular basis. That's got a 0.5 million gallon yield, but we utilize it when we have issues with water quality. And because it has different characteristics in its water quality. So we utilize that. So I think if there was a satellite facility built, it would more or less be for redundancy purposes, for circulation purposes. There would be a cost associated with that. But again, it wouldn't be the size of the facility that would be built that currently exists out at the McLean Reservoir. It'd be a small facility. So what's a number if you're asking me to guess? 10 million, 15 million? I don't know. But it would be, they have facilities like that, small facilities that smaller communities, towns use that pretty much, are compartmental that could easily be constructed there. But again, that's the ideal water system.
So can I just circle back to Jeff's question about, there's these layers of regulations or authority and questions about, what can happen there, right? I think part of our charge is to look at what's possible, not what we're recommending, but what's possible there. And, we understand that there's at least 3 parties that are, there's the Chapter 97, which is more like park and open space kind of stuff. Am I correct in that?
Article 97 is the protection of the lands in the Commonwealth that fall under the authority of the Holyoke Water Works. Now, that land, which is comprised around the Whiting Street Reservoir, is protected under Article 97, which means you can't develop it.
Right.
You can't develop the land, but it can be used for the purpose of the utility itself. Construction of tanks, the construction of pumping stations, anything for infrastructure improvements, it can be used for. But as far as like selling off that land and building condos, that's the law prohibits that.
Because it's a backup emergency water supply.
Well, because it falls under Article 97. It's considered protected lands.
So can you get out of Article? Not again, this is possibilities, not recommendations. Can you get out of Article 97 if the water department wanted to?
It's an act of legislation to do that.
Okay.
That's what it would require.
Okay, so like a home rule petition, we no longer want to keep this as an emergency backup.
And you would have to have a good reason for doing it.
Right, of course.
I don't know if necessarily development would be considered a good reason.
Right. And again,
So it'd have to go through. Yeah.
It's not my recommendation. I'm
No,
just trying to
I know.
understand what's our bookends here, right? So, and then because it is designated as emergency backup water supply. DEP's regulating it, and you have to comply with certain amount of testing, et cetera, probably just to stay in compliance under their rules and regulations. Does that process constrain what kind of recreational uses can happen there? What kind of, non-development type of uses? Would DEP let you canoe on it?
DEP's concern is the active sources. Okay,
Right.
so DEP focuses on the protection of the McLean Reservoir and the Tycarmony Reservoir, because those two supplies fall under our filtration waiver. The Ashley and the Whiting Street do not. So the DEP would be open to the Water Commission expanding on activities. Okay. Is the commission in the position to expand on activities? No, they're not. They feel that the activities that are currently allowed out there are sufficient for the enjoyment of the public. So that's where we stand with regards to the reservoir itself. The dam falls under DCR's jurisdiction in the spillway.
But so really, so it is the board that is the authority on the possible expansion of uses of that property. That's basically if I were promoting hard, and again, I'm not saying that I am, that I wanted to see canoeing or swimming there, Article 97 probably doesn't care. DEP doesn't care. It's the board. It's the Water Commission that's going to say, we don't like that idea.
Right.
I'm not saying and I'm not saying that I don't support their decision. I'm just trying to understand, like, how much flexibility is there in, rhetorically, I'm asking, how much flexibility do we have to actually recommend kind of some uses here, and approval would we need to get, not us, but the city get in order to expand those activities? And I think it comes down to, it's the water commissioners, right? I mean, they're the ones that are setting this up.
Right. Activities that don't violate,
Right.
Or trigger permitting requirements from
Right.
other agencies, or violate or conflict with Article 97.
Right.
Again, it would fall under the board's jurisdiction. The board, however, when we talk about activities, you have to look at, okay, how are those activities going to impact our operation? And a lot of those activities, like I can currently tell you right now, that our insurance does not allow or prohibit any type of watercraft, whether motorized or non-motorized, on the water supplies or on any of the reservoirs. So there's changes right there that would have to be made. And then there's liability limits that would have to be looked at. So when you look at then there's also a cost associated with that. So when you look at increasing your exposure, you look at increasing your liability, and then you ask yourself, who's going to pay for this? Okay, who's going to pay for these added expenses, for these activities? Well, it's going to be the ratepayers of Holyoke that are going to pay for it, because rates are going to have to be adjusted to cover these additional costs, and there's additional costs associated with that. So I think the board is in a position where the activities that currently allow fall under our insurance policy and minimize our exposure to the general public. But you start opening it up to boating and other activities like that. Now you're triggering different types of insurance, and whether or not those insurance agencies would cover those types of activities. And then you're talking about manning, having staffing on board to oversee these operations. And then you're talking about parking. I mean, there's issues with parking now with the activities that are currently allowed. Look at the issues that we're having with people parking in residential areas, people parking on state highways, safety issues. So as you increase these activities around these sources, there's other impacts that have a cost associated with that. And is the board in a position to do that? I don't think that's the board's role here. The board's role is to protect these sources and to provide drinking water, clean drinking water, and fire protection to the residents of the city of Holyoke. And I don't think they're going to be in a position to be raising rates to cover activities that really provide, that are going to be to the general public at a cost to the consumer, to the ratepayers. Does that make any sense?
They belong on Terry Shepherd's budget, not yours.
And there are certain areas that you want to have zip lining. Okay, well, Mount Tom specific is perfect for that. Do you want to consider zip lining around the reservoir? I don't know if that's a practical application for a water supply. Boating. There's a lot of other areas that you are allowed to boat. The Connecticut River. I mean, there's boating activities there. Why does it have to be in a drinking water supply? And what is the benefit going to be to the department? So I think these are all the things the board weighs and considers. But they feel that, there's a lot of money that's invested into these supplies to maintain them for the benefit of the public that go out there and walk these reservoirs, that enjoy these reservoirs. And the question is, it's a balancing act between what's permitted and at what cost.
Agreed. And, I would expect no different answer from the water department than what you just gave. They're rightfully 100% focused on water supply and protecting that reservoir. And, I don't think it's their job or your job to be trying to figure out how to increase recreational uses of your reservoir. Your job is to keep our water safe and clean. And
trying to.
So I get that. I don't, and I can't argue any of what you said. I just was trying to understand, like, who has the authority, like whose stamp of approval do you need in addition to the board? And it sounds like to me, probably, you're not filling wetlands or you're not destroying habitat, those types of things, but just generally, it's the board's authority to direct or approve activities at that reservoir. And
Yeah, I agree. That's correct.
so thank you. That was very helpful.
Was.
I think we all agree.
One of the things that came up in talking with the folks from the Appalachian Mountain Club is that the use of the NET as it skirts the edge of the reservoir is an agreement for a certain period of time.
Yes,
Do
correct.
you have a sense of how the water department is feeling about that? Is that something that at this point whether you're likely to continue or not? Because I think one thing that sounded like a potential is that there may be some possibility to bring in money related to the Park Service's desire to promote the NET. And, if that could make improvements, say to a trailhead, is that something that the Water Commission would be receptive to, or is there a desire to kind of pull back from involvement with the NET? I'm just curious about how your take is on how that's going.
When you say New England, are you talking about New England Trail?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
You're talking about the M&M Trail?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. I was involved in the development of that agreement. That's a 5-year agreement. In fact, we're looking to renew that agreement.
Okay.
There was a cooperative effort to relocate. I think the concern was the original trail required people to walk along 141, and it was a concern about public safety. So what we did was a section of that trail was relocated through the entranceway of the Whiting Street Reservoir off of 141. And there were certain conditions. That were agreed upon under that agreement, specifically no motorized vehicles, no animals, no dogs, no domestic animals. And the New England Trail was supposed to monitor that and make sure that those restrictions were enforced. We did allow signage, which the department approved. We have a good relationship with them so far. We have not had many issues. So my position, if asked by the board about extending the agreement, I support it. As far as expanding on that, again, we'd have to take a look at it. I don't know, when you talk about expansion, what are you talking about? Are you talking about adding more trails? Are you talking about, again, you know, if there's money that's allocated to improve those trails, that's in the agreement, that's allowed. As far as to a certain degree, under the department's supervision, we're not going to let you go in there and clear cut trails or disturb large areas. But there is an agreement to allow maintenance of those trails, which we have been working with NET and like I said, having a good relationship. So I don't know, when you talk about increasing expansion of that, I don't really know what that would mean. It would have to be something we would take a look at. But I think if the agreement left in place is supposed to be presented to the board, I am going to support it. Does that answer
yeah.
any question?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I don't actually know what my thought about expansion, and this is purely my thought, is that if they actually have money, can their money perhaps help solve some of the parking problem up there or the people crossing 141 problem? But that I'm simply, speaking my own thoughts, I don't know whether that's something that could be pursued or whether the water department would be interested in that.
Kate, your question froze, Dave.
Oh no, I was worried that I froze.
Kip, you're on mute.
Okay, well,
I
let
thought
me,
Dave was maybe thinking really hard, but that would be a really long time. Even I don't think of that long before I open my mouth.
Hopefully he'll be back, because that was helpful.
That was very helpful. I mean, as you were saying, Kip, understanding the framing and the parameters here is a good way to approach whatever recommendations we ultimately develop.
Right.
That I still don't quite understand whether, in order to keep his drinking water permit in place, whether he has to have whiting as a backup source. I still don't quite understand that, but it sounds like he pretty much does.
I don't think they have to have it as a, it's nice that you maintain it as an emergency backup, but I don't think they're required to keep it as an emergency. I would guess most municipalities may not have the luxury of an emergency backup reservoir like that.
I think they have to have some backup, whether it's from another town. They have to have the permit requires some level of backup.
Yeah.
But I don't understand.
Right.
I didn't want to ask too many questions.
Well, that would be a good question. I think it was interesting that that it's non-potable as it is already. It would be like a boil order. So that makes me a little more comfortable with the idea of, expanding uses without being overly concerned about kicking from potable to non-potable,
Right.
That was a big
But you-
takeaway for me.
you certainly wouldn't want to expand uses in such a way that they would affect the potability of the water. Because at some point, they may well need to put a treatment facility up there.
Right. And that's what you would do to make it potable, right? So, I mean,
Right.
obviously you're not going to put a gas station next to the place or something that's going to really risk the water quality impact. But it was interesting to hear that it wouldn't be potable. It's emergency backup, but it's not potable. And so unless they spend 10 to 15 million dollars to put in a treatment system, which would
Sue
probably,
Ellen and, sorry, Kip, I just wanted to ask Sue Ellen and Marlene to just check and make sure Dave's not trying to get back in.
I'm checking. I am watching it, and I just double checked the rank of people in two places. So
Nope,
I don't
he's not
see.
there.
be careful who you let in. There seemed to be somebody coming in that was
2 people.
inappropriate. Well, I think it was the same person probably.
Oh,
You
maybe.
know, what we
Yeah,
done,
it sounded like Bart Simpson.
Right.
Yeah,
whoever it was, we uninvited them.
Yeah.
they
Good.
uninvited themselves. That's nice.
Nicely done.
Yeah, that's
my
good.
first experience with that, and all of these Zoom calls and meetings that I've been involved in. That's the first time I've seen any kind of
Same.
behavior like that.
Yeah, well,
I'm-
I would like to get back to Kip's question about potable water. I think both Jeff and I have had some experience with the issue of invasive species. And we have some in the Connecticut River. If you start bringing in people with canoes or kayaks and paddles, you also have to make sure they've been cleaned up. And they have to be inspected before they could be put into an offline reservoir, for the very reason that they could destroy the reservoir. The way Log Pond Cove, for instance, has been seriously damaged by the water chestnut invasion. So, that's something we have to think about when we start thinking about alternative uses. Who is going to inspect anything that's brought in and put in the water? Are we going to suggest that they put a ranger up there 24/7 and that kind of thing? Because that too is a serious expense. So it's just something to tuck in the back of your head and think about.
Well,
Yeah,
right. I mean, I hadn't thought about that aspect of it. There's probably 10 other things I haven't thought about either. And I'm not promoting that. I'm just trying to, people have said, why can't you canoe up there? Why can't you kayak? Wouldn't it be a great place to go for a swim? And, and I haven't had a good answer as to why you can't do that. And part of what I learned today is, you're not risking potable water, which I think makes it less risky to do some of those other things there. But you raise a good point about invasive species and, how would you do that? I don't know, I suppose if there was something like paddle boats there, and again, I don't like paddle boats.
not both.
They're not, I don't like them. They're not fun to me. But, some people like that, and they wouldn't be going in the river and coming there and doing stuff. And maybe you could do canoe rentals. I don't know.
Yeah, well, again, you're talking about something that puts personnel up there.
Yeah.
And that's something to think about, because
Right.
you have to, as Dave pointed out, you have to balance cost
Yep.
against what you want.
Right.
And
For
I
sure.
tossed this out because, I know that Jeff and I have had some serious go-rounds about this problem with the Conservation Commission, which does get this kind of issue in front of it quite often. And for people who haven't served on that kind of board, it was just something I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Dave expressed it really well, that there's, whatever you might want to introduce, you have to understand.
Here comes Dave Conti back.
Ah, great.
Hi, Dave. Welcome back.
Hi, Dave.
Okay, now, somebody brought something up. It's another question for Dave. We're sorry we lost you.
I lost you. You're on my phone now.
Thank you so much for coming
I've got
back.
a picture of you now, so.
Sorry. A computer.
What was the question that came up? Does anybody remember?
It was about the New England Trail. We were talking about that and improvements to parking. And the board really hasn't designated any parking, particularly for access at that location. There is parking along Old East Hampton Road, and that's where the majority of the vehicles park. So, I mean, as far as if there is funds available for improving parking on that particular area, that would have to be something that would be discussed with the board, and they would have to also take a look at, there is sections in that agreement that talk about liability, increased exposure from allowing people to park on waterworks property for that particular reason. So there is some legal questions that would need to be asked before something like that would be agreed upon.
Okay. Well, while everybody is thinking about whether or not we have any more questions right now, Dave, I would like to thank you for taking the time to meet with everybody. This has certainly been a tremendous learning experience for us
Right.
all. There are so many things that have to do with water, with conservation, with regulation. And they're all a part, I think, of what we need when we finally write our report to the city council.
And I hope I answered your questions to the best of my ability. It's just, there's so much information with regards to the regulations governing the water supply and with regards to the responsibilities of the commission. But I think the commission's position has always been, with regards to the water supplies, in line with conservation, is primarily protection and preservation. And that's the direction this board has always been in. But they did, like I said, they do allow activities around these reservoirs, which we feel are not detrimental to the sources and also provide some benefit to the community. And I think that's the balancing act the board is achieved. And I think for the most part, it's been successful.
Certainly everybody I know who has ever had the experience of walking around Whiting Street Reservoir knows how beautiful it is.
It is. It is. It is. I've been doing a lot of, we've been focusing a lot on the Ashley, but I think you're going to see, once they start the spillway work, there's going to be some improvements that are going to be done to the gatehouse. There's areas that we've identified. We're trying to fix up the roads, bring the roads, the standard of the roads up to a lot of the best management practices that are identified in our green certification. So I think you're going to see that what we do out there is going to enhance the experience that people get from walking around these sources. And that's something the board is truly supportive of, is the people. You don't find places like this where people can walk around and enjoy wildlife and enjoy the natural beauty of these supplies. So hoping we can continue with this relationship.
I just remembered what it was Kip's question. Is there anything specific in any of the regulations that are governing Ashley that prohibit any kind of canoe or kayak on the water?
I think those types of activities are not part of the what's regulated under our insurance. I know that is considered. They are still classified as a water source, and allowing these types of activities. And a lot of people have questioned the reasoning behind, these activities are permitted at Quabbin Reservoir. Why aren't they permitted in Holyoke's reservoirs? Well, Holyoke's reservoirs are 500 million gallons, 800 million gallons. Quabbin is 415 billion gallons. So it's 400 times the size of the Ashley and Whiting Street combined for the most part. So the impact these activities have at the Quabbin Reservoir are minimized in comparison to these activities in the in-town sources, our sources. We when we test, again, the regulations now, we're testing in the parts per trillion. So we see spikes, we see bacteria spikes just from geese being in the water supply. Geese, any type of activity like that, there's a spike in bacteria levels. And we monitor those bacteria levels. So these reservoirs are very sensitive to the activities that are allowed around them. So canoeing raises a whole nother series of questions, and it raises a whole nother series of insurance coverages, because when you allow these types of activities, now you're having to bring in these vehicles. You're talking about the potential for more contamination to the source. You're increasing the activities. You're increasing vehicles into the water supply. There's also the dangers that are associated with these types of activities. And I think for the most part, the board and our insurances prohibit any type of activity, whether it's wading in the water supply, fishing in the water supply, or boating in the water supply. So the activities that are allowed are walking around the sources themselves, but in the water itself is a whole different animal. That's my generalized explanation of it.
Great, thank
So,
you.
I'm sorry.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So Dave, related to the New England Trail. So first of all, I think that is great. You were willing to work with them on that agreement personally, because I think, having people walk 3/4 of a mile up that road really, was a dangerous thing. So I'm curious, are there projects that you could see as being beneficial, that you would possibly support, you or the board might support, that might be the subject of a grant? For instance, if the National Park Service or the Appalachian Trail Club came forward and said they wanted to move forward on a grant for parking someplace, or, would you be, are there activities you can think of that there might be needs that might be related to that trail that you could see supporting, just off the top of your head?
I haven't been involved in those negotiations in a few years, so I have to refresh my memory with regards to that. But there are other issues with these trails, and there's issues now that the city council is dealing with regards to parking on Route 202, which is a state highway. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Again, these are questions that really should have council involved in, with regards to, whether these types of projects pose any kind of exposure to the department or not. As far as fixing up trails and repairing trails, certainly the board would support that. But you got to understand that this trail only goes through the property on a minimal amount. It's only a very short distance. So I would say there are other areas. If there are grant money available, they should look at other areas along the trail that are experiencing problems with parking, that are experiencing problems with access. And I don't necessarily know if this location should be considered a high priority or not. It's a very short distance they walk through the water supply. So, but again, the board agreed to it from a public safety standpoint. I think that's what this was all about, was the protection of the people on the trail and minimizing the amount of walking that was on 141. 141 is a dangerous road. They come around that corner really fast. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
When I asked Dave to come, I told him I thought we wouldn't go past an hour.
Well, it is now just about an hour, so ask if anybody else has any questions for Dave at this time. Hearing none, again, thank you very, very much for being with us tonight.
Really appreciate it.
It is seriously appreciated.
It's been a
And,
pleasure.
I know it's extra time and a long work day. So,
Well, here. No, it was
Thank
nice. It was nice.
Thank you, Mr. Conti.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
now, we have a half an hour if you want to spend the time to start thinking about what should appropriately go into a public meeting or a public hearing. And whether we want to start thinking about the uses that we might want to add or talk about, whether we want to talk more about what we've learned so far. Up to you all.
I guess, just a question, general question is, do we think we've gathered, are there other people or other organizations or other partners, neighbors that we think we need to communicate with before we think about the public meetings or community meetings?
We do have one, Marlene. We had wanted to talk with the gas and electric department.
Right.
That's why Michael Curtin has been sitting in to listen to
That's
what
right.
we've been talking
Hi,
about
Michael.
the past couple of meetings, so that the department will be prepared for questions that we have about their land adjacent to the reservoir, and that'll be the first meeting in June.
Thank you.
So that answers that one question.
Yep.
And I don't have anybody else.
That's June 1st, right?
Yeah. And I, excuse me, I don't have anybody else on my list that anyone said they wanted us to speak with.
I think that makes sense, HGE. I think we've collected enough information to begin to think about the kinds of things we would like to, the issues that we would like to point out. And then, once we've laid out the issues, then we can talk about whether, there's enough agreement among us to at least, lay out some potential, recommendations that could then, because I think we discussed last time that we need to be providing the public some guidance. So we're taking their comments based on something we're suggesting instead of just being wide open. So I think we agreed to that.
Yes. So maybe, Jeff, that's a good idea. I mean, maybe the frame here would be, this is what we've learned. These are some of the issues, and these are the boundaries of what is allowable. And then, within those boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure we're talking about, right now we're talking about the public hearing a little bit. We haven't talked about the report as much. I think the report would probably require a meeting for us to think about, the structure. I think some of that's pretty obvious. The charge of the commission itself, some of the issues, the regulatory framework surrounding the reservoir itself, then the issues, and then with some discussion around each of those issues, and then some potential recommendations. But that might need some, that's just off the top of the head, that might need some more fleshing out.
Dave, I hope you got all that, because that sounds like a really good plan to move along using.
Yeah, what a lousy week to be taking minutes.
It was just right.
Wow. I hope I can get them to you by the 4th of July.
Need them by Friday.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that.
What else do you have to do, Dave?
Yeah, right. I have nothing else to do, Jeff. You're right. But I didn't want to say much, but I'm real happy that Mr. Conti came and just contributed and participated. He's a good manager.
I think one challenge is that I think that even if we lay out what the parameters of the possible are to a public hearing, I think we're still going to hear from people sort of wishes and dreams for that area that are not within the bounds of the possible,
Right.
according to what the waterworks charge is. But I think it would be good if we can figure out a way how to address that in the sense of, what's a good way that we can say that's really not going to be allowed, but that idea has some merit for the city to consider somewhere else under some other circumstances. We still want to hear, it's still an opportunity to hear needs and desires of the people of the city for outdoor recreation, even if that can't happen at this site. So I think we want a way to capture that information, but also, let people know what the bounds of this particular call is,
Well, Kate,
without stopping them from giving us information.
I think that's part of why we have been hearing what all the neighbors and abutters are interested in. And one of the things that we have heard loud and clear is that they would all be interested in participating in some sort of neighborhood, if you would call it that, discussions of what could be done on their various properties, how they might be used and how they could work together. And those are things that we might easily get through this public hearing. So like you, and I think all of us, we wouldn't want to cut off any of that comment, because if it isn't useful on the reservation or on Whiting Street Reservoir itself, it might be something that an organization of these property owners could talk about and develop.
Yeah, like I'm thinking like some kind of a education program for children, nature education that could be, areas, not just the reservoir, but more general to some of that, similar to like what Audubon does, things like that. So.
And what we are finding, we've got a very special area in that there are so many endangered and one-of-a-kind species on the mountain and in the general area that make that idea particularly interesting for everybody.
Well, I think the other issue that we know that has come up is that you can't solve very much by just looking at the reservoir itself. And, we can only make so many recommendations, but, I suspect some sort of further area study could very well be one recommendation, but that just does kick the can down the road though. And I'm never crazy about that idea, but I don't think I think it's hard not to do that in this case. So does this need to be the subject of the next meeting for us to think about it a little bit and really flesh, or is the next meeting really, I guess, whether Michael comes and talks to us about HGE, or what's our focus?
Well, I would think that we need to first we need to listen to what Mike has to tell us. Certainly he'll try to answer any questions we have. Mike, jump in on this, please. saying anything that that you think you could say better. I'm sure you could. You know so much more about what's going on that mountain from the standpoint of HG&E. But I think we ought to plan on the meeting being devoted to that. Then if we have any time left over, I think we've got to get down to brass tacks and start thinking about exactly how to present a public meeting, or even if we're ready for that public meeting. Or if we just need to chew on some things in committee further.
I think it makes, thinking about all the things that we've learned in the last 4 months, I'm sure we've all learned a range of new information, putting, pen to paper and outlining a meeting framework, that talks about the, items that we address, the regulatory framework, the things that Jeff was mentioning that's driving Dave crazy in his notes. I think, we can begin to flesh out those things, and then we will know, what sort of construct the public meeting might have. And, clearly we're going to hear, other things other than what we specifically asked, but, that's just part of the, part of the nature of, community meetings and public meetings. People are going to have some ideas and wishes for things that they could do here. But I don't think it's wrong to take time to develop that, meeting framework. I think we would want to do it in a way that's going to be constructive so that we can learn something from it when we, think through recommendations ultimately.
Any other thoughts? Basically, it sounds to me like we're all in complete agreement. So what would you like to do? We've got 15 minutes. We could do two things. We could start talking about an outline, and we could go have dinner.
Let's go eat.
All right. So before we go, Kip, are you coming tomorrow for the walk?
I don't think I can make it. What time is it?
It's 4 o'clock.
Well, I have a meeting in Rhode Island at 4:30, so I'm not going to be in that. That came up
Okay.
just yesterday. Unfortunately, I'd love to go, but no can do.
Okay. Kate, are you coming tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm planning to.
Yay. Yeah, so I'll be there a little bit ahead of time, but 4 p.m. We'll meet Bob and learn more. We will continue to learn more.
Okay, I would like you to give Debbie 5 minutes. She will be coming from work, and
You can. We'll wait for her.
okay. Anything else that anybody wants to add?
I guess I'm just wondering in terms of being able to launch into thinking about how to structure the public hearing. I know for me, it's often easier just to respond to something rather than start from scratch with the group. I don't know if anybody's willing to, even just make a first swipe at, what a structure might look like, and then we can build on it.
Well, I think we, excuse me, got some of that in the notes that Dave has been valiantly trying to keep up with and Jeff came up with such a good outline for, then Marlene added to it. So I'll
Maybe
tell
we'll
you
just cut and paste that.
those minutes. I'll see if I can put them, those thoughts, into some sort of outline, go through my notes and see what I can add to the outline, and then send it out to everybody for addition.
I would love that. I think that would be helpful.
Great. That'll be great. And, you know, we might be learning things tomorrow as well.
You know, that's important.
So, as my count is, there'll be 5 of us.
Okay, well, I'll do a minimal outline. Of course, with everything we've learned, minimal could be awfully long, but we'll see. And Kate, have you heard anything back from Pioneer Valley yet?
Not yet. I can try to check in before our next meeting. I wasn't necessarily anticipating that I would hear anything yet. I mean, I know they were ready to start work, but I don't know where it lines up in their,
Yeah,
you
well,
know, actual work.
I just don't want to
schedule.
forget, so I will bring it up every meeting.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to have something, but we'll make sure there's time to talk about it.
Right.
Anything else?
We're all good. Jeff, I'll see you tomorrow. Harry, I'll see you tomorrow. Kate, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yep.
Good.
Debbie, we'll see.
Okay.
Good seeing everyone.
Very
You know,
good. Excellent meeting.
Did,
Hi, Albert.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Summertime.
Bye, Mike. See you.
Something to say?
Yep, thank you. Bye-bye.
Albert, you want to come tomorrow?
That would be wonderful, but I didn't think I was allowed, shall we say? But yes,
It's
Certainly
just-
are allowed. It was. for the-
I personally, it's not the, yeah.
You're
4 o'clock at, what gate did you say?
4 o'clock at the main gate, the wonky yellow gate, coming up Mountain Park Road, Mountain Road.
Park Road. Harry, you gonna bring your bike?
Yeah, so I was thinking that I would go up there at 3 o'clock and take a little bike ride and meet him at 4. Would you like to join me?
That would be perfect.
No dogs
All right.
allowed.
Albert, you're on.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'll
How
call
about
you in the morning.
3 o'clock. tonight.
Albert, I saw Bernice
Thanks,
in the
everyone.
background. Does she want to go?
Say again?
I saw Bernice.
Oh,
in
no,
the
she has a meeting. Yeah, another meeting to go to.
Wednesdays are not good for Bernice.
No. This week, there wasn't any day good for her this week. It was quite full.
Well, I'm glad you're coming, Albert. You're a font of knowledge and you can provide us some guidance on our next steps.
Let's hope I am able to contribute something worthwhile. Let's say.
Great.
We know you can.
Sure.
All right, you guys. Good seeing everyone.
Good
Okay,
night.
good night.
One and
Bye.
all.
Have a good night. See y'all tomorrow.
Yep.
All right, see you in the
Night
morning.
all.
Thanks.
Enjoy the night.
Good night.